We do have a quorum, so it's 6:33, and I say that we should call this meeting to order. Councilor McGivern is going to be late. He texted me, and he's coming from another meeting, so he will be here. So this is the March 27th meeting of the City Council Development and Government Relations Committee. This evening, present in person, we have myself, Tessa MURPHY-ROMBOLETTI. I'm the chair of this committee, and then I'm joined in council chambers by committee member Councilor Jenny Rivera. We're also joined on Zoom by Councilor Linda Vacan, who's on this committee.
Good evening.
Hi, Linda. Thank you. Thanks for being here. And then I'm not sure if maybe Councilor Bartley will be joining us. So we're also joined in person here by Councilor Maldonado Velez. Oh, I see Councilor Bartley on the Zoom. I'm going to I think I'm promoting you to a person on the panelists. That might be a Jeffrey thing, so I might let him do that. Okay, cool. Councilor Bartley is joining us on Zoom as well. We're joined in the chambers, as I was saying, by Councilor Maldonado Velez. And on Zoom, we're joined by Councilor Will PUELLO. We're also joined this evening by our state delegation. State Representative Pat Duffy is here in council chambers. And we're joined on Zoom by State Senator John Bayless. So thank you both for being here this evening. And we also have Attorney Bissonnette. And we have some folks in the audience. So I'm looking forward to a great meeting. First, I need to entertain a motion for this evening, because we have folks on Zoom, to take a roll call vote that for the purposes of this meeting would be applicable to all motions to remove an item from the table, package items, or suspend the rules unless there is an objection.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Do I need to do a roll call for this?
Yeah.
Okay. Councilor Rivera?
Here.
Or yes.
Yes, sorry.
Councilor Vacan?
Yes.
Councilor Bartley? Might be on mute still. I can move forward though, right? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Oh, there's Councilor Bartley. Hello.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes. Gotcha.
I am such a novice at Zoom. Sorry about that.
It's all right. You're doing it. No problem. Thank you. All right. So with that, I actually would entertain a motion to take items 1, 2, and 3 together as a package.
Second.
Great. All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. So this evening, item 1 on the agenda, all of tonight's agenda items are related to our wonderful state delegation. So the first is ordered that the City Council invite our state delegation to attend a DGR meeting to provide the council with a legislative update for the year ahead. This is something we try to do a couple times a year, so thank you for being here. The second item on the agenda is filed by Councilor PUELLO. That the state delegation be requested to please draft and support legislation that would amend the NEEDO program in the city. The program was voted down twice and stopped a third time through a lawsuit. State legislation was passed to allow its operation. This requested legislation change would only allow needles to be issued to users if a used needle is exchanged. A needle exchange rule will go a long way in helping solve hazard issues in the city. And then last, item number 3 was filed by Councilor JOURDAIN. That our state delegation and mayor be invited before the finance committee, but it got referred here, to have a dialogue on how we can improve our local aid funding formulas with the state and together develop a plan of action, then collectively discuss our strategy on how to act upon the plan to ensure Holyoke is actually receiving the money it needs to operate effectively and is getting its, quote, fair share. So I'd love to invite Representative Duffy, if you'd like to come on in to the City Council chambers. Absolutely. Absolutely. And no problem. And then just make sure if the light is on, that means the microphone's on. So then everyone at home can hear you.
All right. So
wherever you'd like. Yeah. Make yourself comfortable. Great, and thank you. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you to Senator Vallis as well for joining us this evening. We know you're both very busy, and so we appreciate you coming before us to just give us an update on what you've been working on and what the year ahead looks like for you all. So I'll pause there and let you go.
All right. Am I speaking in the mic? Not yet. Oh.
There you go.
Very bright
There you
light.
go.
All right. Thank you so much. And yeah, we are both busy, but what's more important than coming and meeting with our constituents and our local elected body and our local leaders and we can all share priorities. So Senator Vallis, what I'm thinking is, I'll do a little spiel and I'll pause and let you jump in. So it's not like me talking for 20 minutes and then you talking for 20 minutes. Does that work for you, Senator?
Perfect, Representative.
Excellent.
Thank you.
There's his smiling face. I love it. All right, so my first little spiel, I've been thinking about this. It's a good thought exercise, so I appreciate the yearly visit and the question, like, what's going on in the legislature right now? And I feel like the theme of the work that we're doing in state government is sort of off-ramp from the pandemic. That's kind of what we're all focusing on, both in good ways, right? Because the health emergency is ending, fingers crossed, but also in ways that are more of a challenge too, because there's been some pretty substantial federal aid coming to the state, and we're sort of off-ramping from that. And while the state has been and seems to continue to be very financially healthy, that's a big, frankly, chunk of change that's slowly moving away from the table. In addition to that, I'd say there's two very obvious crises facing Massachusetts, and one is the high cost of housing, and I would say every level of housing. Yes, like we need more affordable housing, we need more starter homes, we need more places for seniors to move into, we need more apartments, we need more houses that can suit a family. This is something we really all need to be focusing on. And so I would say that the senator and I, with our committee assignments, and I'll start with mine, I think that we're really well placed to help Holyoke in this crisis. So for myself, I'm on Ways and Means. I'm also serving again, I asked for these two committees again, on healthcare financing and higher ed, which are both, they're important state policy places, but it's also about two really important institutions here in Holyoke, the Holyoke Medical Center and Holyoke Community College. I'd say they're two key, not only serving institutions who serve our population well, they're also really important employers for all kinds of jobs, all levels of jobs, great training and entryway jobs for our population. So it's important to me to be supporting those institutions. I'm also on the Veterans Committee with himself, the chair, so that's a good spot to be watching the implementation of the new Soldiers' Home governance, which I know the senator will be leading a lot of that up. And I'm also on the new Agriculture Committee, and I'm really excited about it. I think that's a great place to be talking about gateway cities and food security, etc. So I'll pause there and share the floor with the senator.
Thank you so much, Representative. Can you folks hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Well, I guess first and foremost, as always, thank you for the invite. I think it is really important that you folks do this, and it's been throughout my time in the Senate. The Holyoke City Council and various committees have invited us to speak, and I can't stress enough how important I think that is. Secondly, I want to apologize that I'm not there in person. It was my full intent to be there in person, and I don't know if my friend the rep shared the news from my world, but long story short, on Saturday I decided to play in a basketball tournament And right now I'm dealing with a pretty severe, hopefully not broken, ankle and foot right now from a 3-on-3 basketball tournament. So
No, that's
yeah,
too
so
bad.
I'm on crutches, and I've been kicked up, I should say, to my attic to recover, if you will. So I'm joining you from afar in Zoom, but my intent was to be there in person, and I most certainly will be there in person the next time we do this, which I know will be sooner rather than later. Kind of just to piggyback on some of what the rep said, here in Massachusetts. Well, I guess from the committee standpoint, I am on a lot of committees. Obviously, on the Senate side, there are a lot less of us. There's 40 of us. I am the current chairman of both the Mental Health, Substance Use and Recovery Committee, as well as the Veterans and Federal Affairs Committee. Certainly willing and happy to chat about both those topics. The rep touched on one a little bit with some of the Soldiers Home stuff going on, but suffice it to say that, I will be monitoring everything that happens at the home with a microscope, a very strong microscope, ensuring that everything goes according to plan. With respect to the other committee that I'm the chairman on, I have frequently taken to saying that we are in the middle right now of both a mental health and a substance use crisis in Massachusetts and beyond. It continues to plague us. I think it's getting worse. I don't think it's getting better. And I think mental health, and I guess I'm really speaking about behavioral health in general, which both mental health and substance use obviously falls under. But again, we are in a crisis, and these two issues, in my opinion, are the biggest issues that not enough people are talking about. I've got serious concerns about the impact of mental health on all demographics, but certainly on kids in particular right now. The CDC just came out with a study, or I should say a survey, about a month and a half ago, and what they found was just absolutely, in my opinion, catastrophic. Adolescent boys and girls, but more so girls, experiencing unhappiness and sadness and suicidal ideations in unprecedented ways. A lot to unpack there, but I'm diving into that right now. I fully anticipate that the legislature this session will do both a mental health bill, a substance use bill, and really try to tackle into some of what we can do on the local level, the state level, as it respects to that. There's getting to be a lot of data and empirical support about some of the stuff, some of the impacts of social media on adolescent kids in general. Been diving into that pretty extensively. And then again, the co-occurring nature of folks, struggling through a SUD, a substance use disorder, as well as a mental health concern. We really have to do more. And I say that as a senator from a state that really has led the way in terms of the response to the opiate epidemic. But unfortunately, it's now really, the influx of synthetic fentanyl is really robbing people of their lives in ways that we haven't seen before. So there's a lot to unpack there, and certainly willing and happy to chat about that with anybody who wants to dive in a little deeper. And then kind of just to, I guess, touch on a little bit of what the rep said. Massachusetts, we are getting to a point, I would argue we are already at that point, where affordability, living in this Commonwealth, is getting harder and harder because the cost of living is going up. Housing is going to be the issue that comes up over and over again on a recurring basis. There are any number of components to the housing crisis we have, the housing affordability crisis we have. There are many drivers of that, much of them, I should say, or I should say a big driver of that is that demand just far exceeds supply. We just do not have enough housing units in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to prevent these costs, or I should say try to help control these costs, if you will, from skyrocketing. And there are some really challenging studies to read right now, real difficult studies to read right now on the impact that could have on Massachusetts, 10, 20, 30 years from now, when folks are getting to a point where they're really beginning to consider if they go to school and they graduate, is Massachusetts a place I can afford to live? And if you're here, is it a place that I can afford to stay in? And housing, as well as other things, but housing is a really big part of that. Obviously, that's intimately tied to another priority of mine, workforce development. We've all talked about really pretty significantly and exhaustively about the skills gap that we're seeing right now. There is a workforce shortage, I would argue, in almost every industry that's out there right now. In fact, I really can't think of an industry that's been immune from this. And it's having an impact on all types of areas: healthcare, mental health, just the ability to really function as a commonwealth. Again, workforce challenges, workforce shortages are something that are pervading everything in the Commonwealth right now, and some transportation things that obviously continue to, roads, bridges, et cetera, things that I know we're going to, I think, get into a little bit with Councilor Jourdain's conversation. So I think with that, certainly a lot to unpack with everything that both my friend and I, the rep, have said. With that, I will turn it back over.
So we could see if people have questions now, or I could dive a little bit into the local aid conversation.
I mean, yeah, I think that overview is helpful. It's always really great to know which committees you're both on and advocating for on the local level. Let's have you talk specifically, if you'd like, about Councilor Jourdain's order and.
Yep, because it makes sense to me that we take up number 2 last, and maybe bring some of the experts who are here.
Sure. Yep.
Does that if
that makes sense to me?
If that makes sense,
for sure.
Madam Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Thanks. So, the senator, the mayor.
Oh, actually, before I forget, I just got a wonderful reminder from our administrative assistant. We're actually joined on Zoom now by Councilor Jourdain and Councilor Givner. So Thank you both. Just wanted to make sure we all knew.
Perfect. Welcome, counselors. So perfect timing, because Senator Vilas, Councilor Jourdain, and the mayor and I had a great conversation. I know that you all here in the council have been talking a lot about local aid, possible resources as far as state government goes. I do have, if you guys haven't seen it yet, I have the governor's estimates on what she's going to do for local aid, and I think the House is going to be very close to this, if not more. So for Chapter 70, the governor is proposing almost $97 million. That's an increase of about $7 million, and that is a projection of full funding for the Student Opportunity Act. And then the number that I would agree, we all need to work together to figure out how to improve this. For unrestricted local aid, the governor is proposing almost $12 million, and that's an increase of only about $200,000. So we had this great meeting where Councilor Jourdain, I think he, I don't want to say that he was speaking for the whole council, but given the order too, it seemed like it reflected conversations you guys have had here. And it was a conversation about, I think the model is the Chapter 70 reform that happened in 2018. We need, I would agree, in my opinion, and much of the Gateway City Caucus agrees on this as well, there's a flaw in the fundamental formula on local aid, and it should follow the same sort of progressive, and I mean progressive in the technical term, formulation that Chapter 70 now follows, where poorer cities with more challenges, do get more aid. Because sort of we have a flawed formula from decades ago, and we keep building on that, so the discrepancies across communities is kind of getting worse. So the good news is that a lot of the Gateway City Caucus is talking about this and prioritizing this. I don't want to say bad news, but it takes time. This is a campaign. Like, I was involved in the Chapter 70 reformulation, so I worked for my predecessor who took a lead on that, as we all know, Rep Vega was a big lead on that. So I know you have to bring all your colleagues with you. And there's 200 of us. And, it's not that my colleagues from wealthier communities are not generous people. They are generous people, but they don't see it and know it the way that we do. So the stories you all tell, a lot of the data that Councilor Jourdain shared is part of this campaign. And there's been legislation filed by the chair of the Gateway Cities Caucus, Tony Cabral, who frankly has been around when a lot of these local aid formulas were made, and he's got a good eye for the flaws in them. And Andy Vargas from Haverhill, and we share a lot with Haverhill, and he's a wonderful colleague, where it's following the path of the Chapter 70 formulation, where we need to set up a special commission and really do an in-depth study, talk about the flaws, get testimony from people, and make the argument. So I know that can take longer than all of us would like, but I'm not against the deliberative legislative process too. So I don't know if you want to chime in there, Senator.
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah, just to echo what you said, we had a great meeting with Councilor Jourdain as well as Mayor Garcia. And Councilor Jourdain, I'm sure I'm surprising everybody here, came to that meeting with a good amount of data. So I'm sure you're surprised about that. And that was very helpful. That was very helpful in many different ways. So I guess for purposes even of background, right? I mean, there may be some folks, so local aid, I guess, defined loosely, if you will, money that comes from the state coffers, if you will, the state budget into local municipalities' budgets, et cetera. So Chapter 70, obviously, we're talking about schools. 90, we're talking about roads and bridges. And then you've kind of got this hybrid form, if you will, of UGA, the Unrestricted General Governmental Aid. And I guess I'll begin with the latter, because I think that, I know in Councilor Jourdain, I know you're going to speak here in a minute, but UGA has always been tied, I shouldn't say that, it's been, Governor Baker kind of had a policy where he tied UGA increases to really the tax revenues or projected tax revenues that the Commonwealth was going to have for that year. And I know that one of the things we're going to talk about is some of the formulas, and I think that is more a Chapter 70 and a Chapter 90 discussion. But in the UGA conversation, I just would bring attention to what happened last year. And I say that because I think a big part of this discussion is a lot of times the answer, particularly as it relates to UGA funding, is not necessarily legislation, it's advocating. For example, last year at the beginning of the budget, Governor Baker came in, I think it was with a 2.7% increase to UGA, again, that unrestricted general local aid. And the Senate, and again, that's not a Senate-House thing, because in many years, it's the House versus the Senate and vice versa. A lot of times it's a back and forth, but the Senate pegged that number and said, no, we need to increase that by, it was either 5.3 or 5.4%. I forget which one it is. And ultimately, that was the number that was adopted in the budget. And I really bring that up just to say that, it's very important, I think, to remember, and we are hearing you loud and clear, and we will hear you loud and clear, but that message is something that's been delivered, heard on, and acted on in the past. And I point to just last year, where the legislature has a history of listening to the municipalities and saying, no, we need to do a little bit more than that. And that happened just last year. Now, the second part of that, and this is something that I agree with, and I'm sure there's folks on here that too, I don't think, so if we were to go by, the projected numbers for this year, I think it's a 1.6% increase or 1.7% increase. And then the governor came out with a 2% increase of unrestricted local aid. I do not want to speak for my colleagues in this, but I will say that my humble opinion and my advocacy to begin as early as tomorrow, when I have my meeting with the chair of Ways and Means in Boston, is going to be, again, we need to go above and beyond that number, for the very simple reason that, those numbers have a really difficult time catching up with what you folks are seeing on the ground, right? Inflation, all these other things that are happening, and we need to be mindful of that. Hence, another great reason why we're doing this right now. So I'm with you on the whole decoupling of that projected increase in tax revenues for the Commonwealth from what we should increase UGA. I think it should be a standard that's kind of based on how listening to our colleagues in municipal governments and responding to that. And that's going to be my message to Senate Chair of Ways and Means tomorrow. But again, just reiterating the fact that this is something that we have done in the past, and as evidence, or just I would say just looking at last year, it's something we did where the governor came up with a number, we ignored that and said we should do more. Chapter 90, our friends in the House did their transportation bond bill last year. Of course, there was the 200, the Senate will be taking it up this Thursday. And I would just bring to your attention. So there's the $200 million as part of that for the Chapter 90 money, but also the additional $150 million. And I want folks to pay real close attention to this part, because this is the money that specifically earmarks for grants and transportation grants. So a big part of that, I think, is going to be folks on this, in this chamber, coming up with things that they think that some of that money could be used for, letting the rep and myself know, and us going after and targeting that grant money, because I think that is a really, it's not an increase, if you will, to the Chapter 90 allocation, but it's $150 million in transportation money that communities are going to be eligible for to go after that. So if you get nothing else from what I say tonight, please remember that $150 million pool of money that will be available that can be targeted. And then Chapter 70, I can't agree more with Rep. Duffy. We just need to do a lot in terms of that formula in many respects is antiquated. I've got real concerns this year in particular. I know we've heard loud and clear from schools about that decision that was made from the state entity that I constantly forget their name, but setting the rate. So for the private schools that have private special needs schools, that increase of 14%, that increase the tuition of 14%, that municipalities are going to be on the hook for. We have heard that loud and clear. We are contemplating some type of a fix for that right now. That was a hot topic of discussion last week at our Senate caucus, and we've heard you loud and clear on that. That is a significant increase of 14%, and we are aware of that. And there's nothing that you're going to tell me on this meeting tonight that I haven't heard from from many of you on this meeting, but also from all parts of my district, that any 14% increase is it's a hit. It's a hit, and we know it, and all of my colleagues are hearing the same thing. So we are contemplating solutions for that right now, but we know something needs to change in that respect. So yeah, 70, 90, and then the UGA. Turning it back over to whoever.
Thank you. Great. I see that Councilor Bartley has his hand raised right now. Councilor?
Hi, Madam Chair. Am I coming through? Because I'm just
Yes.
green at this.
You're good.
Okay.
I'll let you know if we can't hear you.
Yeah, I don't even know how to work this. I'm barely even surviving today, but thanks. I'm just going to be as quick as I can, and I'm just going to hit a few points. And thank you to both John and Pat for being here. This is something we started, I think, in 2013 when I first chaired this committee, and I'm grateful that we've had over the years some great interaction with Beacon Hill, either from our delegation or from outside delegation as well. We've been very blessed to have several reps from around Holyoke come and visit us, and it's been enlightening. I'm going to touch base on a few things directed to both. I can just spit them all out, and if you want to react, if you don't want to react, that's your call. As I said 3 billion times, we are not the U.S. Senate, okay? So this is a friendly back and forth environment. The first one is, this might be more for John and Pat. Relative to the Soldiers Home, John, I have, that is Ward 3. I have not personally received any phone calls. I don't care. But it sure would be nice if you would lead something to get, when the time is right, neighborhood involvement as much as possible there. So I just want to bring that to your attention. I'm sure you'll agree with me, but I want to make sure that's forefront, because there's going to be effects on all the abutters, of which there are multiple dozens of homes surrounding the Soldiers Home. So just point that out to you, John, and I'll happily work with you on that. But the second one is, John, you mentioned mental health, and I'm going to suggest to you that it could be argued that people living in tents in Holyoke and people panhandling on the streets of Holyoke could potentially, I'm not saying they do, but could potentially have mental health issues. And yet, then the city of Holyoke does what it can to try to reach out, but it's sporadic. When the delegation was here a couple of years ago, I did note that the SJC struck down the general law relative to preventing or limiting panhandling. We talked about that. The decision said, dear legislature, come up with something better. For example, something that's not content-based. I'm going to tell you that the town of Framingham, well, city of Framingham now, is now come up with something that they think is content neutral. But is that what we want is that what we want from my Boston-based friends? Do we want 351, or do we want you to update whatever I think it's chapter 272, but whatever it is. Or could we have you file a bill to get us something that's content neutral, so that all the communities could be on the same page and try to limit this? We know that Worcester and I might have been Lowell, they got hammered by the ACLU. Good for them. And we certainly don't want to have that in Holyoke. So I just want to point that out to you. That is still a big issue. My last one for right now, and I probably have a whole bunch more, but I don't want to monopolize. John, you're quoting the paper as supporting an update to the Quinn bill to support the Mass State Police. But as you know full well, when Governor Patrick revoked the funding, he didn't make an attempt to revoke the law. So the law is still in place, and the law is near and dear to me, because near and dear to my father, because Speaker Quinn was one of my father's major mentors. And here we have that tossed about like it's a dirty phrase. It's not. It is something to support police that are generally the first responders along with firefighters, but the police are usually right there first before anybody else. And to try to give additional incentives for state police is great. But meanwhile, the city of Holyoke continues to pick up not just the municipal half, as it's always done, but the state's half. Why does that continue to lag? This started before either one of you got in office. I get it. But I sure would like to hear something, doesn't have to be tonight, but something about these topics, something about inviting the neighbors to the Soldiers Home, certainly something about the Quinn bill, and certainly something about panhandling. I just told a fib. I'm going to say one more thing, and this is, again, not to be controversial, and you don't have to answer it, but I keep seeing headlines in the Herald and the Globe about the auditors pursuing to try to audit the Great General Court. It's my hope, and I know you're not going to believe this, but it's my hope that you'll push back on this. So now, it's not going to make it, maybe it won't near and dear you to the, excuse me, to the far, far left, but there is a huge wall between the executive and the legislature. We've had that breached multiple times in little old Holyoke over the last year. It's my hope that you'll fight that and you won't allow her to dive in on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Counselor.
Hey.
And I'll allow the delegation to respond.
Thanks. John, I do think a lot of those were sort of directed to you, but I've got like a one sentence on each of them. The Soldiers' Home, of course, the neighborhood should be involved, getting in as construction happens. And I'm sure Senator Vilas and I can work on getting neighborhood meetings. It's a really good point. As far as panhandling, if Framingham I'm a big believer in looking into best practices. I'm happy to talk to my colleagues from Framingham to find out what's going on, and I'll be looking for something that we've got to find a balance between safety and compassion. We'll be getting into this conversation more, but I'm a big believer that our approaches when we're dealing with folks who are struggling with emotional or mental challenges, what's the harm reduction way of handling this? But I do understand that there are safety issues there. The Quinn bill is an unfunded mandate. I totally agree. And as far as the auditor goes, actually, I agree with you, Counselor. There's a separation of powers there. She's a member of the executive branch, and her predecessor did not think she had the right to audit the legislature, so I think that's pretty compelling.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Senator
so
Vilas.
did I unmute myself?
You're good.
Yes, I did. So Councilor Bartley, however you want to do it, myself, Rep. Duffy, you, any constituents, we as an office, speaking only for my office, obviously I can't speak for the reps, we have had dialogue with some of the neighbors, but I think it's a great idea. You want to do something kind of on a grander scale, if you will, like a neighborhood coffee hour or whatever. Certainly happy to do something like that. I love that type of stuff. So if you want to do it in conjunction, would love to join forces with you and the rep, and certainly anybody else on the council that wants to engage on that topic. Yeah, the Quinn bill, it's been an unfunded mandate, and part of the, a big part of it, I mean, you already recited kind of the history of it, but when former Governor Deval Patrick kind of pulled out of it, this bill that's been filed, it's what it's done in municipalities, and we've kind of got this patchwork where some municipalities still have some benefits, some do not. It's all over the place. The state police, if you joined after a certain year, I believe it was 2009, you're no longer eligible for this benefits. That's what this whole bill being filed was all about. And I would take it a step further and say that, to your point, I mean, our police, I've gone on several ride-alongs with our friends in the Holyoke police, and it's a really, really difficult job. And I think that a big part, and it even talked about it in that article, right? Police reform 2.0, if you will, I think is how the police officer referred to it. I think it's in everybody's benefit to have an educated police force. I think there is empirical data to substantiate that if you have an educated police force, use of force issues, just fill in the blanks, many problems go away. And the Quinn bill really, really did a good job at that. So I wasn't in office at the time the Quinn bill went away, but certainly it's not something that I support, hence the filing of the bill. So this is a conversation that's just getting going. I've got multiple meetings, Counselor, in the next couple weeks with a lot of the involved stakeholders. As always, happy to have conversations or a cup of coffee with you if you want me to kind of talk you through where we're going with that. So always willing to engage on this issue or any others. And then with respect to the auditor, I got to be honest with you, I am so immersed in like the challenges that we as a Commonwealth are dealing with right now. I don't want to be dismissive. I don't want to sound like it. To me, it's just, taxpayer resources are vital, right? Taxpayer money is vital. I'm not telling you it's something that isn't a good use of taxpayer money, but what I am telling you is that there are a lot of vital challenges. We've discussed many of them tonight already that we need to be focused on. That's what my focus is on. Things like the affordability of living in Massachusetts, the mental health crisis, what Councilor JOURDAIN's about to talk about with local aid, So it's not that I'm not interested in it, but to me, I want to focus on the very real world work that's going to impact the people that I represent in Holyoke and the 8 other communities, and then happy to join forces with the rep. I like that verbiage, a content neutral way to kind of address the issues that Holyoke and other communities are seeing, because I do agree with this. There are, in some instances, there are benefits to municipalities kind of doing their own thing, but it becomes really problematic, particularly when you have First Amendment issues, which the SJC, I haven't read the opinion in a while, but it spent a lot of time talking about First Amendment concerns. And to me, that type of an opinion really recalls, like they asked for, to your point, for kind of a universal Commonwealth response. So happy to have that conversation.
Thank you, Senator Vallis. I see Councilor Jourdain's hand is up.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Hopefully you can hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, I just want to thank Representative Duffy and Senator Vallis for being so gracious with their time to host myself and Mayor Garcia to have a really nice roundtable discussion on a whole host of things that we really want to do to turn Holyoke around financially. The first thing I would say is that, you know, the state is our #1 customer in terms of, obviously, we're serving these mutual constituents. But in terms of our funding source, if this were a business, you know, you're our largest revenue stream. So we need to go back and take a look at what our costs are compared to the amount of money that we're receiving to provide the services. Because I think we all agree that we want to provide great services, and I know they both do, and they work really hard to advocate for Holyoke. And all I can say is, you know, we really are going to need you more than we've ever needed you before, because this is going to be a fight for our future, a fight for the type of Holyoke we are going to have going forward, because the system is rigged against us. This current local property tax formula is based on a system where a community can generate enough revenue to pay for the needs of the entire community. But what happens when the system is fundamentally flawed, that there's by far more need than there ever could be revenue to generate currently? See, that's what the system didn't presuppose, that because it was based many, many years ago. Especially since the social fabric and the social safety net was not anywhere near like it is today. And we've also seen a segregation of communities, where communities like Holyoke that are welcoming of the most fragile in society, as we properly should. We step up to the plate and welcome everyone. We're willing to take care of everyone. And so, but the dilemma with that is, in the old adage of no good deed goes unpunished, the way the system is designed is the more needs that you have, the more people are willing to come and fill those needs. Okay, so one, we take residents that need affordable housing. A lot of communities are extremely exclusive, don't want affordable housing in their community, have done everything they can to make sure that poor people aren't in their community. We have not taken that approach. So that obviously creates the potential for concentrations of poverty. Concentrations of poverty are shown, and you don't need to be a Harvard economist to know that concentrations of poverty cause property values to go down, because where there's concentrations of poverty, there's also higher crime, lower all of the social determinants of life, be it more high school dropout rate, harder to get employment, you name it, drugs, all these things sadly comes with higher incidences of poverty. And this is why some communities, they don't feel the social fabric like we do to address these things and to be welcoming of all people across the socioeconomic pendulum. And so we, by doing that, have really set ourselves up ethically, we're doing the right thing, but we're set up for failure because the system says that you have this high need and you have lower property values because it's supply and demand. If you have higher needs and higher social issues, your property as a general rule is less valuable, unfortunately. And so, moreover, I would also point out that when you have more social need, more nonprofits come into your community, obviously so, because that's where the need is. They come in to fill that need. And as a result, when more nonprofits come into the community, they purchase more property and then take it off the tax rolls, as an example. And this whole thing gets us to the data that I presented to you previously, and I'll eventually share my larger work that I'm putting together for my colleagues when the time is right, about where this really leads us positioned for the future. Because Holyoke at $60 million tax levy isn't meeting anywhere near what we need to do. And we have one of the lowest excess levy capacities in the entire state of Massachusetts. And so we're not able to meet our needs. And so as a result, what other communities would healthily take on in terms of unfunded pension liability or deferred maintenance or capital improvements, we don't have the capacity to do that. We also have residents who are in the most tax burden. Holyoke has among the highest residential tax burden in all of Massachusetts. We pay about twice the state average in terms of affordability. How ironic is that for a very poor community? So as a result, our residents are paying a huge portion of their disposable income in property taxes here to the local community. So we need you, Senator and Representative Duffy, to help us break out of this box. Work so hard with your Gateway City colleagues, who I'm sure, whether you're a Lawrence or a Haverhill or Fall River or these other communities, I know you get it. I really appreciated your time addressing that. But we need these resources to rebuild this community. And I'm so thankful that you mentioned this $150 million. We have a lot of infrastructure that we need here, whether it's sidewalks and parks and schools and all of this. There really needs to be a time when the state says, we're sitting on billions, we need to reinvest in our gateway cities. Because if you don't do it now, when will you do it? Because the state has had times when they didn't have a lot of money. So there really needs to be a concentration to change the paradigm for us. So I just want to thank you so much again for that opportunity to be with you. I want to continue to have that dialogue. I want to again thank Mayor Garcia, who's been so receptive to doing things a different way. I would want to point out to you, and I'm going to segue into putting my Soldiers Home trustee hat on, because for those that don't know, I also volunteer to help the Holyoke Soldiers Home. And I'm so thankful and appreciative of Pat Duffy and John Vielas' efforts on behalf of the Holyoke Soldiers Home and this beautiful new facility that we're going to get for our residents up there at the Holyoke Soldiers Home. I was sitting at an update meeting with DCAM the other day, and they said, hey, trustees, we've decided to purchase and demo a house on Fairmount Street in Holyoke to make more room for the new home. And okay, that's fine, you're doing that. But I asked the question, okay, DCAM, what efforts are you doing to give Holyoke the $4,000 a year that home pays in property tax? Okay, that now goes tax exempt, and Holyoke loses $4,000 a year because that home is demolished. We got to think like that. Holyoke doesn't. We have police to pay for. We have teachers to pay for. We have firefighters to pay for. And I know you get it, but things like when you're making these things on the unrestricted general aid to the community, Go back and say, because I can give you the number, I don't know if that number came up in our conversation, but it was $500,000 a year. For over 11 years now, more than that now, since 2009, so actually 14 years, we've lost $500,000 a year in Quinn bill funding. So when our unrestricted aid goes up $200,000 a year, and you go back and you say, okay, well, how many years did it take to make up just for the Quinn bill one? The nursing school of HCC, that comes offline. The state puts a nursing school there. $82,000 a year we lost when HCC. There's got to be something somewhere where the state puts that in and helps us out with that. On that pilot front, and Senator Vilas, I thought, had a very fair comment. He says, you know, Kevin, we can work really hard to help you, and we're going to help Holyoke and do everything we can, but don't forget, you know, you guys got to do everything you can to help yourselves too. And it's a fair comment, right? Because we got to do our part. And to that effort, I really applaud the mayor has really embraced this notion about what we're doing on pilots and reaching out to those that can. And maybe it means they adopt a project like the new middle school that says, you know, we're going to really target to do that. It's all of those things that's going to turn us around. I think we need an immediate shot in the arm of around $4 million. I'm very concerned about the recent bond analysis that was done by Moody's that dropped our bond rating back on December 13th. They did so because one of the comments they made is, you know, you're at 80% depreciation of your capital plant. That's a fancy way of saying you're almost getting the salvage value, Holyoke. Okay, you have massive reinvestment that needs to be done in this community. Where does that come from? I cannot go when you take the people with the highest tax burden now on them and say, I need more. There's only so much more. I can't say, go give me this and give me tax overrides and give me more and more and more. These folks don't have it. They're battling inflation. And all of this needs to be accounting for our inflationary cost too. So I've said a lot there. I know you both get it. You're wonderful. You're hardworking. You've got our best interests in mind. I so appreciate your time. I appreciate the time of Mayor Garcia, who's focused like a laser beam in turning us around. I'm convinced if we make these efforts and make this case, I pointed out how compared to the average Massachusetts community, we're getting about $4 million below where we should be, dollar for dollar, because we have higher police costs, higher fire costs than the average community. We're fairly funded now for schools, but on the general fund side, it's short, and this is really manifesting itself on DPW and capital improvement. So, which, by the way, we're among the lowest in payments to DPW and capital improvement in the state of Massachusetts, by the way. Okay, segueing to the Soldiers' Home. Senator, since I happen to have a captive audience, I'm going to bring up something. The OIG recently came out with a letter to the board about really saying and it's clear, I think your intent in that new governance legislation that you mentioned earlier, that the board and the Soldiers' Home to have control over the trustee funds to provide the added services to the residents at the Soldiers' Home. And the OIG came back and said, that's so.
Counselor, did we lose you? All of Zoom looks frozen. Wait, no. Senator Vilas is moving.
That the legislature did do.
Counselor Jourdain, we lost you for like a couple minutes. Like 30 seconds. I don't even know if he heard that.
I think he's from my end, he's frozen again.
Okay. While I've got you here, we're joined by Counselor McGivern in council chambers, and Councilor Rivera Israel Rivera has joined us on Zoom, so thank you both. We might have lost him. We'll wait. One more second. All right, well, there, all right, he has left us. We'll wait on that end. And, would you like to?
I can answer, there weren't even questions, but just sort of more ongoing conversation that we'd already started. I just want to say on the local aid stuff, it was a great conversation. We do hear you. And when it comes to that UGA, that unrestricted local aid, I 100% agree with everything Senator Vilas said, but I would take it a step farther. I think much like what happened with Chapter 70, I think the underlying formula is flawed. I do. I agree with that. And which is why I think, medium term, maybe kind of long term, we need a commission to change that funding formula. In the meantime, I get it. We both get it, that we need money and capital funding now. So there are a couple of things coming down the pike. There's going to be at least one major bond bill this session, if not more than one. So I know the senator has projects in there. We've already got the modernization of the High Street electrical grid is in the capital bond, that queue for about $10 million. I know this is true of the senator too. I meet with the mayor all the time, and I've got a list from him, and near the top of the list is improving that DPW facility. And so we had a large economic development bill in the fall, and that was our state allotment of ARPA money, which means we did not touch the state surplus, and that's about $1 billion. So there's going to be some sort of economic development bills, et cetera. So we will stay in touch with you about the most pressing needs.
Great. And we did have Councilor Jourdain back with us, but it appears we have lost him again, so I'm going to pause there. Councilor Bacon, I saw you come off mute.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had just wanted to make a brief comment on one of the more specific points relative to the panhandling, because we had talked about this at one of our past quarterly or semi-annual updates. And I just want to extend my appreciation to Rep. Duffy and Senator Vilas for whatever they will continue to do to weigh in on the safety aspects along with the mental health aspects and interventions related to this tough community issue. And so I'm grateful that you'll reach out to the folks that have worked up some content neutral language so that hopefully we can all get on the same page and find that tough balancing point that we're all seeking to get to. So thank you on that. And I'll reserve my other comments when we get to the needle exchange agenda item, except that I would say on that point, and there'll be others weighing in, I'm sure, that I'm supporting Councilor PUELLO on this. You may remember, although I don't believe either of you were there at the time, that it was added as an outside portion of the state budget when that came into being here in Holyoke. And back in those days, the needles weren't as available as they now are readily available. And unfortunately, we've had folks coming in from the neighborhoods now for some time talking about public safety issues because of the issues of needles on the ground. And also that the program isn't really aimed at or geared to helping people get off the drugs, which I think really needs to be part of our focus along with intervening on the mental health aspects. And as we all know, this is a very complex issue, something that won't be solved in a meeting tonight. But again, we're looking for that balance of the public safety and the caring intervention for people with serious issues. So I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but thank you for indulging me.
Thank you, Counselor. And yes, I'm sure we will dive into that conversation shortly. Counselor Jourdain has joined us, and you were about to say something about the Soldiers' Home. So I'm going to let you.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that. Just switched laptops. I don't know why I had an issue there, but thank you so much. Yeah, I was just quickly mentioning about the Soldiers' Home and the fact that I do volunteer at the Soldiers' Home as well. And I wanted to mention to Senator Vilas, who worked a lot on the governance bill, that, and I believe it was the intention of the legislature that the board and the Soldiers' Home could have our donor funds, and it was put into the new legislation that we would oversee those funds for the residents. I just wanted to bring to your attention the OIG is saying, we don't think the legislature meant that. And we're not sure about that. So they're looking for you guys to tighten that up. And I do want to let you know that there's a lot that the Soldiers' Home does for the residents through the gracious gifts of donors in the community. And if we want to see that continue and be supported locally, I'd like to work with you to tighten that up. So I did want to mention that on top of all the Holyoke things. And if you didn't hear the part about thank you so much for your time at that meeting and being so gracious with your time. I do so appreciate it and everything that both of you do and Mayor Garcia does as well. Thank you.
Councilor, just real fast. I've got a meeting with the OIG coming up on that very topic. You and I can certainly talk offline, meet for a coffee, however you want to do it. Looking forward to continuing that conversation. Obviously, continuation of all of your other remarks, a continuation of what we started. And I am convinced that if we all continue to, do what we can, both on a state, local, and federal level, working together, I am sure that we will be able to continue to get a lot of good stuff done. So I appreciate all your thoughts today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I see Councilor McGivern has a question. Comment?
Thank you. And first of all, I apologize to the committee, and I apologize to our guest, Rep. Duffy and Senator Vilas. We had our annual meeting this evening. It went a little bit longer than normal. Normally, I just tell Tess I'll be here about 6:35, but it's okay. I'm sorry for not being here for your presentations, but I think just along Councilor Jourdain's, I say it a little bit different and a little bit what Holyoke is, not just as a gateway community, but we are a community that didn't create poverty, but we attract poverty. And we as a community do a pretty good job of servicing and doing the right things for poverty and the everything that comes with the higher ratio of low-income people than most communities face with. And I think we do it for the right reasons and with a smile on our face. But that doesn't mean we don't need help, from our Ward 8 people and from the people that, like to cross the river in different directions and live elsewhere. But I would like to talk about the Soldiers' Home, and I've said this before, and I know each of you are aware of it. Part of the proposed development will include the parking issues on top of the hill. And that comes with a tremendous responsibility of stormwater runoff, because we have some serious issues in those neighborhoods. And I'm not saying the parking lot is causing all of it, but it contributes to underground water tables, underground streams, and stormwater runoff, to a very delicate situation. And when the Soldiers' Home was built, stormwater runoff wasn't something that was talked about, but please keep that in mind. And Kevin's right. I understand the need. The Holyoke Medical Center, I can't tell you how many houses they have bought to expand their parking lot. And when some of us approach the powers to be and ask them why they're not building a parking deck, and they cite the expense of building a parking deck, but it's okay to take homes off the tax rolls for the city, good homes, to expand the parking lot because it's cheaper. And these are the issues that we face as a gateway community. And it just goes on. Bay State has their lab in the former Wang laboratories. The Wang laboratories we're going to, when Dr. Wang agreed to come to Holyoke, we're going to save Holyoke. And that manufacturing building was built. It is now off the tax rolls, and Bay State operates their lab out of it. They park 100 vehicles overnight in that lot. We can't even hit them for excise tax, yet they can drive on our streets, back and forth, and, the list goes on. But if you could, thank you for thank you for what you do. Both of you are tremendous to this city, and we appreciate your efforts and understanding what's going on. And these are good roundtable discussions. We know we're not going to solve the problems of the world tonight. I keep staring at Rep. Duffy, John, because you're on Zoom, and I hear you had a little problem playing basketball, but we welcome each of you here tonight, and thank you again.
I think I'm going to have to retire after Saturday's performance. I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you all. Thank you. I don't see any other questions as it pertains to some of the conversation we've been having here, and I'm not seeing any online. So this evening we also have on the agenda, as I mentioned, item number 2, about the needle exchange program in the city, and we are joined this evening by staff and volunteers from the Tapestry Needle Exchange Program. And I would, since we are going to be talking about your program, I would entertain a motion to suspend the rules to allow our guests to come sit with us and
So moved.
participate. Great. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? So moved. So we have Liz and Pedro, staff at Tapestry, and we have some folks, a couple folks in the audience. So welcome. Come on in. And then just as I was saying to Representative Duffy, if the green button's on, your microphone's on, and that's how people at home can hear you. So thank you. And so the item here in front of us is requested towards the state delegation. So I don't know if it makes sense to, would you like to address that first from our delegation, and then we can go from there? Whatever you prefer makes sense.
I sort of want to set a context. One is that I support needle exchange. But I guess I have a question back. Like, is the question being put to me, like, as
yes,
by a
great question. Why don't we have the maker of the order? Sorry about that. Usually that's what I try to do.
Yeah.
Councilor PUELLO, as the maker of the order, would you like to introduce the order that's on our agenda this evening?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, nothing crazy. I'd like to hear maybe if we could get a little bit of perspective on what the thoughts are on the program. I did call down there today, so I did double check. My understanding of the way it works right now is you can go down, you get a needle, you don't have to do an exchange. We're not asking to get rid of the program. We're not asking for anything, I think, overly too much. I think some residents have asked for us to completely get rid of it. I think this is a decent compromise, just to see if maybe we could talk a little bit about what we can do to turn it more into an actual exchange program, so that we don't have residents going down to parks and finding needles, folks taking out the trash and finding things in the alleyways and outside in the sidewalks. Appreciate it. If that makes sense.
Thank you, Counselor. I'll pause there, and I'm actually going to offer the team from Tapestry. If I'm correct, is this the 10th year that we're in operation? So I'd love to just hear any answers to Counselor PUELLO's questions, or just an overview as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thanks for having us here. I'm Liz Wynott. I'm the Director of Harm Reduction, and I oversee all of our syringe access and disposal programs, including the one in Holyoke, and I'll let Pedro introduce himself as well.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having us as well. My name is Pedro Alvarez. I'm the Assistant Director for Urban Drug User Health and Outreach at Tapestry. And in my role, I oversee our harm reduction programming in urban settings. Thank you.
So we just celebrated our 10-year anniversary in July of 2022, and I am happy to be here again. Where do I start? So focusing on Holyoke and our syringe access program. When we opened up the syringe access program in 2012, it was done, I think, as a community in response to the heroin epidemic and the overall trend in drug use, as well as the number of people injecting and needing to access a service like Tapestry. And at that time, the only one in operation west of Boston was in Northampton, Mass. So when it opened up in Holyoke, that was the 5th one to open up in the state. Within the past 10 years, the evidence related to the success and need for the program has just continued to grow, and people's understanding of the benefits has only grown as well. So again, Holyoke was the 5th, and today I counted that there are over 60. So within the state of Massachusetts, I counted over 30 stationary sites all over the Commonwealth, as well as an additional 30 sites that operate on a mobile basis in different towns. So in terms of the benefits of having a syringe access program for people who use drugs, there's overabundance of evidence shown that they decrease HIV, they decrease hepatitis C. The connection to the program and connection to further services has also been linked to reducing overdose deaths, as well as linking people to different forms of care, including substance use treatment and primary care and other forms of health care. We partake in all of those interventions, and so both Pedro and I could talk a lot about how much we do believe in the actual distribution of syringes and collection of syringes. That's one small part. That's one of the things that we do, and I think both of us would agree on is that probably one of the greatest things that I enjoy about this job is the connecting with people who use drugs, who are an incredibly stigmatized, isolated, and at-risk population. I'm sure that we all are aware of how awful the current fentanyl and general poisoning of the drug supply has been across the entire country, with Massachusetts being one of the hardest hit states, has seen a tremendous increase in deaths from opioids. We're up against an impossible situation, and the syringe access program is a well-known public health model that focuses on prevention, again, on things like HIV, hepatitis C, and death. And I can soundly and confidently say that the team at Tapestry and at harm reduction programs that also do the same type of work that we do have saved countless amounts of lives. In addition to that, they're also shown to save a lot of taxpayer dollars through preventing things like healthcare issues that would cause people to go to the hospital. And so at Tapestry, that's demonstrated through one of the new initiatives that we have that's part of our harm reduction program, which is providing what we call street medicine. So we have doctors and nurses and medical professionals out on the street. We're there in Holyoke 2 to 3 times a week at least. They park a mobile van and they see the people who are at most need of acute care and provide services. One of the things that we've been seeing a lot because of the horrible space that the country is in with drugs is an increase in wounds and also an increase in endocarditis, which is an affliction of the heart. And so just as an example, being able to treat those two items prevents people from needing to go to the hospital and preventing very expensive care. So that right there is just an example of one of the newer initiatives that we're doing. And then lastly, there's again about 60 places in Massachusetts. And since we opened in Holyoke, we've also opened offices in other parts of Hannibal County, including Chicopee, Westfield, and Springfield. And then we have other offices in Hampshire and Franklin counties. Pedro, do you have anything else to add?
I'll just add on to some of the collaborative efforts we've had at Tapestry, working with different organizations and agencies. I heard individuals speak today about like the housing crisis and homeless crisis we have here in Holyoke. We've been partnering with Elliott Homelessness Services for about the last 6 years, where they're coming into our site here at 306 Ray Street and connecting with folks that have been identified as chronically homeless. Since we started the partnership with Elliott Homelessness, we were able to house quite a number of individuals that can still have their housing to this day. So again, it's seeking out the collaboration within the community as well. We've established great working partnerships with Holyoke Medical Center, Holyoke Health Center, Mita Vista, which used to be formerly Providence Hospital, that offers detox services. So again, establish and working relationships with those agencies and entities where we can, provide those resources to the participants that we serve in our offices as well.
I'm sorry, I just want to add one more important thing, because I know that this order was focused on the actual needle exchange part. So we would be amiss just, and we can answer more questions around this, but we do focus on taking in more needles than we give out. And we do that in a variety of ways. With the way that we work with participants, we also host monthly cleanups in the city of Holyoke, where community members are welcome to join us and walk around the different parts of the city to collect. And then we also have a hotline, Pedro brought hotline cards that people can call, and we respond to go pick up discarded syringes within 24 to 48 hours. I know that different parts of the city uses that hotline when needed, including the Holyoke Police Department and DPW.
Thank you. I'm going to pause there. Councilor Puello has his hand up.
No, yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. I wanted to thank the folks at Tapestry, and I just wanted to say I really appreciate the statistics and the work that they do. I just wanted to clarify, that this order was mostly addressed, it was totally addressed to maybe our state delegation. And, I understand the statistics, I understand, and I'm really grateful for all the work that the folks do, again, and the cleanups. The order is, for the state rep and the state senator, what can we do on the legislative side to kind of maybe start a discussion about changing this, or giving, communities back giving them the option, giving, the city council maybe, for example, a voice in this?
Well, there's a couple different ways to think about this dialogue. In one way, Councilor, you're speaking to me as a constituent, asking me to support a policy change, which is great, and we should always have these conversations, but I'm wondering if what you're actually asking is for the city council to debate something that, whether or not you want to bring it to us. It's two different conversations, if you understand what I'm saying. Because given the description we just heard, I personally am not seeing a need for a fix. So that's where I'm at. So, I don't know, Senator Vilas, if you want to add anything?
Well, yeah, so a couple things. One, thank you to the counselor for bringing forward. I love kind of engaging in these conversations. Obviously, Tapestry for the work that you do. But I guess I would just, first and foremost, I would say is that I think it's, as indicated at the beginning of kind of my remarks, is that, I just was blessed, a month or so ago, getting named the chair of mental health, substance use disorders, and recovery. So this is an issue that will fall squarely in the work that my committee is going to do. So I don't want to put the cart before the horse. And what I mean by that is that, Counselor, I am more than willing at any point in time to have a conversation with you about, this topic, kind of where Tapestry is, the work that they're doing. I just think it's premature on just to talk about a legislative fix right now when there's, I mean, well, just speaking for myself right now, we've heard about the impact this has in terms of, stopping or minimizing the spread of HIV, hepatitis C, other bloodborne pathogens. The evidence that I think is pretty significant in that not only does it not include increased drug use, it does the exact opposite. And one of the things that intrigues me about some of these needle programs is the fact that they're a meeting folks where they are type of place, and that, we're seeing a lot of empirical data suggesting that people that utilize these services, these clean needle services, I think I read a stat today, are more than 5 times likely to actually go and get treatment, which ultimately, to Counselor Vacan's point earlier, is really what we're after, right? Trying to help people, meeting them where they are, but ultimately, if they will decide that they want to, turn over a new leaf, if you will, for lack of a better way to describe it, then they should be doing that. Then that's something that should be encouraged. So I guess if I sound perplexed, it's more from the standpoint of, I think what they're doing is saving lives, preventing the spread of diseases. I think it's helping people get treatment. I think it's doing a lot of good. Now, I'm an evidence guy, right? So if there's evidence suggesting that's not the case, please, by all means, send it my way. Now, if it's not about that, and if it's more about, I recently was in New York City visiting an overdose prevention site in East Harlem, and there was kind of the neighborhood concerns, if you will, about, whether it be needles on the ground or any other things that we would say, in the surrounding neighborhoods, if you will. If that's the conversation you want to have, also happy to have that conversation as well, to talk about ways that we can be of help and be of service. But I think I just heard Tapestry mention all the things that they're doing in terms of, picking up needles that have been used. But again, if there's more that can be done, obviously willing to have that conversation. So I guess from my standpoint, I'm more just a little bit confused about, anytime someone inquires of me about filing of a bill, it's what are we getting after here? Because as far as I can tell, Tapestry is doing a really lot of good work right now. So I guess I'm seeking clarification.
I'll pause there and see if Councillor Puello has anything to add in response.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I'm just, I mean, I'm a little confused myself. I'm a little upset about the reception to it so far. So first of all, I want to address a couple things to the state rep. I'm bringing this forward not as a constituent. I'm bringing this forward as the Ward 2 representative who has plenty of complaints from constituents of the district that constantly send in pictures of needles in parks and streets and alleyways, community gardens, next to vegetables, tomatoes, where people go in and plant and stick their hands in dirt, and constituents are upset about the fact that they're running into this problem. A lot of people say, and I'm not here disputing or debating that Tapestry's bad, and I'm not saying that they don't do a lot of good work. We're appreciative of the work they do, especially in Ward 2, where they go into the alleyways and they go into the neighborhoods and they clean people up. I have plenty of constituents. Shout out to Carmen Acasio that's done work with them in the past and has gone on to, clean needles and clean different areas. What people are asking for, and you wouldn't believe the amount of people that quite frankly are asking to get rid of this completely. I don't know, maybe people aren't talking to enough people down in Ward 2, where a lot of these needles are being found. But the reality is that a lot of people are asking for this whole thing to just be gone completely. What we're asking for with this order is to please change it with legislation, because this is forced on us through legislation, to please change it to at least have a one-for-one exchange. A one-for-one exchange. If I go in and I bring a needle, I get one back. So that means that I'm not going to find one possibly in a park, possibly in an alleyway. And for me and for a lot of constituents out here that I represent, think that's acceptable. because they're not running into these problems when they go outside with their kids and their families and all the other things that they do. So, I mean, I'm just, again, I'm perplexed. I heard the word perplexed. I'm perplexed at how this could be confusing or not good. I promise there's plenty of people. There's a lot of photos. I can email. I can forward emails. I can do, whatever our state delegation thinks is appropriate. But there's plenty of people that have phoned in with this as a main concern. Thank you.
So, Councilor Puella, I really want to apologize. For one thing, I did not have that context or background, and I appreciate you bringing it to me. I'm in the same spot as the senator is. I don't really see that right now the next step is filing legislation. The next step is learning more. So I'd be happy to, if you want to put a meeting together, or if anybody that you're talking to, tell them to call me. I'm always happy to have a conversation. I don't want to put Tapestry on the spot, but if somebody wants to join or give me materials and I can talk to the constituents, I'm happy to talk to folks, hear people's concerns, and we'll see how the conversation goes. I personally think they'll hear about the program, and I'm hoping it can alleviate some of their concerns, but maybe not. We'll take the conversation from there. So I really apologize. I did not have that background. I wasn't sure what the order was or what you were really, if you were asking for a city council home rule petition or, yeah. So, thank you.
And then I guess I would just say, well, so, and I mentioned this in my initial comments, right? So it sounds to me that it's just what the counselor said, is that this is more of a conversation about needles being found in the community. Well, in fact, I know I didn't, because I just said it. You know, if that is something that the council that you're hearing about over and again, absolutely, that's a conversation that we need to have, and we need to be part of that solution, because that is a huge challenge for a community, and it's something that nobody wants to, and in fact, I was, looking at some of the testimony, and I always mispronounce his name. I didn't have the pleasure of serving, but the former chief of the Holyoke Police was one of the strongest proponents of needle exchanges, for the very reason that, dirty needles, for lack of a better way to describe them, are one of the biggest threats there are, with, an officer, a firefighter getting poked with some of these needles. So they were some of the biggest proponents of, in fact, this program, because what it does is it disseminates more clean needles throughout in the community. To the extent that there's a confusion on my standpoint, is that, and again, maybe this is where we need to have more conversations, because my understanding, and I guess this would be a question for legal, is that, any of these proposed changes, there obviously was a 2017. So I guess I'd have a question for the counselor in return, is like, what impact do you think, and I'm just reading it, the AIDS support group of Cape Cod versus the town of Barnstable would have on this discussion? That was a unanimous Supreme Judicial Court opinion from 2017 after all of this transpired. And in one of the holdings in that case was, and again, this is the court, not the legislature, was that local government approval is not required for the operation of a private needle exchange program. And then you've kind of got these sister organizations that are DPH sanctioned, that says that there needs to be local approval, but that local approval is in the form of the Board of Health. So again, to the extent that I'm confused, I just want to clarify, you're talking specifically about requiring, let me put this differently. What about state law is impeding what you're asking right now?
Yeah, can I answer that, Madam Chair?
Yes, sure.
Okay, I appreciate it. So just really quickly, just to give a little bit of the background too, because I think that this is important. I think we should remind folks that needle exchange did come up in the past, and it was defeated through a ballot question. So a majority of the city voted against having this in the first place. So I think a lot of this just comes down to, and I understand what folks in Cape Cod are saying, and in other parts of the state, maybe in other parts of the country, that's great. What I think is important is what constituents here are saying and want. And if a majority of people are asking for some sort of legislation that people want a needle exchange, because I've heard other people, other counselors call it a needle exchange program. It's not. It's not a needle exchange program. So that's what the rule, mass state legislation. If it was through city council, I would have done it 9 months ago. But it's a mass state law. It's not a needle exchange program. It's a you walk in, we're sorry that all this stuff is happening. Here's I'm not sure what their process is, but it's not a one-for-one exchange, and that's what people would like to see. And again, it was defeated through ballot questions. So I appreciate the statistics from Cape Cod, but focusing on Holyoke and what local people would like to see from their state delegation, I think is important.
No, Council, I just want to be clear. It was a Supreme Judicial Court that involved a fact pattern from Cape Cod that impacts all of Massachusetts. But be that as it may, yeah, no, I'm aware of the procedural history of what's happening in Holyoke. What my specific question is what about state law is the current impediment to what you're asking? It sounds like you're asking for there to be some type of a requirement for a one-for-one exchange for a needle for a needle. My question to you is, what in state law precludes you from doing that?
Well, I guess if we want to, can we ask Mr. Bissonette, can we ask the legal department, is there a way that the city council can just suddenly come up with a one-for-one exchange rule without the state legislature somehow making it into law?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to suspend rules to hear from legal.
I have a second. I don't hear a second.
Is anybody going to second my motion?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay. Councilor Bissonette or Attorney Bissonette? Same thing. Did you hear the question?
Chairman. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, there's like a weird, I don't know who it's coming from, but there's like a weird echo.
It's Councilor Bartley, I think.
I'm going to mute you, Councilor Bartley, just for now. Okay, go ahead, Attorney Bissonette.
I think, good evening to the members of the legislature, Senator, Representative Duffy, good to be with you tonight. Let me start off by saying Senator Willis is absolutely correct about the local ability under the Cape Cod ruling to influence needle exchanges. I think in this instance, he's quite correct about the local boards of health may be able to entertain regulations that, in association with those groups that are providing needle exchanges, to address that question. Some have likened this to a sort of bottle bill situation, but the ramifications are much more extensive. As to the role of the council, I would have to look to the case law again, but it seems a cursory reading would say no to the council's ability to impose such a requirement. And I would be happy to research that further, Councilor PUELLO, if the committee so desires. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Attorney Bissonette. Right now we have Councilor McGivern, and then we have a couple other folks with their hands up. So, pause.
Thank you, Councilor. And Liz and Pedro, thank you. And for what you do, and from a public health and a public safety point of view, I commend the operations at Tapestry, not just what you do with needle exchange, but what you do with reaching out to help people who are in crisis, who are in need, and your cleanup efforts and stuff. That's probably above and beyond, but certainly appreciated. 10 years ago, 12 years ago, there's a big difference in the position that I took, and I'm not afraid to talk about it. Matter of fact, I think we should talk about it. And while Senator Villas is asking, and I think he's making a good point about some of the other issues that are at stake here to the local community, Tapestry is doing your job. The Board of Health, when they got the okay to take over the local control, did their job. What we got taken out of was the social economics of the issue of drug abuse and substance abuse. And Holyoke isn't not just about substance abusers in the city, it's about dealers. And that's where we lost some of our say, because when Tapestry came to Holyoke, you were number 2 in Western Mass. There was advertising in Springfield to come to Tapestry in Holyoke to do needle exchange. That settled, to me, did not settle well. Now that Tapestry is in Westfield, Chicopee, and Springfield, it's a whole different story. And I commend what you do and the way you do it. But to our state delegation, we need to start focusing on the dealers, the trafficking that is coming into I-91 corridor into this city, and bringing not just the people, but a lot more than just the people who live in Holyoke, but bringing people in, become homeless or are homeless because they come here to get their drugs. And that's the focus that I'd like to see is, and don't get me wrong, we have a great task force. I work in the public courts, so I see this on a daily basis as a probation officer. We have a great task force, in terms of local state police getting together and intervening and trying to, and I think we've made a lot of accomplishments. But the issue to me to Holyoke is, why do we need Tapestry? How did fentanyl get into Massachusetts more than any other state in the country? That is the scariest thing in the world. Why is it now that marijuana is legal, you go out the street and buy some marijuana, you're likely going to have fentanyl, PCP, or cocaine in your marijuana? I mean, dealers are ruthless. They want people to get addicted because to them it's a business. They don't care about the overdose. They just replace someone else with as a client, as a purchaser of their product. And that's the part that I'd love to see us focus on is putting more efforts into stopping the trafficking of illegal drugs, not just in Holyoke, but in the entire I-91 corridor.
Amen. And I would, we've got Gallooni, Sheriff Cochee, that task force doing incredible work. We've got to back up those resources, and I'm happy to meet with anyone, anytime to, find out from them what resources they need from us, 100%. Yeah, because we know we're on the 91 corridor, and we see what happens because of that. But 100%.
Thank you.
Just briefly, one of my favorite things to do, I'm going back to when Chief Pratt was Captain Pratt in charge of narcotics. My first ride along with HPD was with the narcotics unit. And I've done multiple subsequent ones on some of the state police task force that HPD is always present for and serving proudly. And to Councilor McGivern's point, I couldn't agree with you more. Those who disseminate in this poison is where the focal point really needs to be, because as has been brought up multiple times already, people are dying left and right, and it's not getting better. And that's kind of where I said about the need to focus on that almost excessively in this legislative session, the impact that fentanyl has on everything and what we can do to target those who are disseminating in this poison. So just couldn't agree with you more, Counselor.
I thank you both. And I wasn't being critical of either one of you. I think you know that. It's a roundtable discussion. And John, I guess we're not going to be playing basketball, in the near future here, but I appreciate your efforts. And we just got to continue that fight because it's scary. And I know Liz and Paige will see it on a different angle, but it scares the heck out of us.
Appreciate it. Councilor Vacan.
Thank you. So my request to help the committee and the council gain some more information regarding this, because it's been a while since we had the update, would be to ask if the Tapestry folks could forward the studies relative to the data they shared tonight to the committee so that we can make it available to the other counselors in terms of the statistics and the outcomes that you mentioned. And I'd also be interested to understand how many people are being referred out and have entered treatment if you're now tracking that. In the past, the program was not tracking things like that. So I'm very happy to hear that there is collaboration going on between your program and the people that are intervening in the addiction problem. And it did strike me because when we were having the debate about local control, and it was the state legislature that changed it from the council to the Board of Health, and that is what limited the ability of the council to affect any changes in the law. In those days, the syringes and needles were not readily available. And that is something that has changed a lot in the last 10 years. But nonetheless, to Councilor McGivern's point, we have people on a daily basis overdosing here in Holyoke. A recent study showed that more than half of those people, and I want to say it might have even exceeded 60 or 70% of those people that overdosed here in Holyoke were not from Holyoke. So unfortunately, and that's not to take away that there may be certainly statistics indicating decreased incidence of Hep C and things of that sort, the level of deaths from drug overdoses has increased. And so it's hard to get our arms around a harm reduction outcome here. So any information that you can provide to us to support that, I think is helpful to educate us in terms of the effectiveness of the program in this regard. So that would be my request. And again, I appreciate the work that people are doing. We really, really need to stop the dealers. And unfortunately, every incentive that we have to make it easier for the people to use also makes it easier for the dealers to sell, unfortunately. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councilor Bacon. And I'll just encourage my colleagues. I don't want to speak for the team at Tapestry, but I did go down there a couple months ago. I was given a tour. I was given a lot of information on the work that they do, and not just what is given out, but also the types of referrals that are being made and all the community partners. And I do see another counselor with their hand up, but I did have a question, and I think probably this would be for the Tapestry staff. But is there, the one-to-one exchange, are there any other sites in Massachusetts that are doing that right now? And if there are not, is there like a reason why this hasn't happened yet? Is there scientific evidence to show otherwise, or just a little bit of that? And then I'll go to the next counselors.
Yeah, sure. So I did check with DPH on that recently, and there are no other sites, or there's no site in Massachusetts that operates on a one-for-one exchange. And I also call this a syringe access and disposal site because I really do believe it's important to separate the two in terms of making unused syringes available to people who use drugs to decrease the spread of HIV, and then also really focus on disposal, because that's a very important thing that we do through what I already mentioned with the community cleanups, with the outreach that staff do, picking up needles as needed, and then through the hotline. And then we also have a disposal kiosk available at the site. And then Councilor Bacon did mention that needles are readily available. For example, you can purchase them at CVS or Walgreens, and there are no disposal options there. And there are no disposal options, I think, available at a lot of other places that sell syringes. So the reason why one-for-one is not a good public health issue is because in Holyoke, We do have people that come in multiple times a day, or not multiple times a day, I'm sorry, that come in multiple times a week, offer them what they need in that moment, and they bring back what they have in that moment. But we are dealing with a very transient population that has a lot of issues with getting to and from the site on a regular basis. Things like transportation and just access. And so requiring that puts the person at tremendous risk for acquiring HIV and acquiring hepatitis C and other bloodborne pathogens, as well as the other negative effects that happen from the constant reuse of a needle and also the using someone else's needle.
That's helpful. Thank you. Councillor Jourdain has his hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to ask, well, I'll just put it out there that when this was brought to Holyoke and it was advocated by the former administration, Chief Neiswanger, by the way, that was the name of the chief that the senator was trying to remember, by the way, Jim Neiswanger. He said, I endorse this because it's going to be a one-for-one exchange. That, as we know, we've just heard very eloquently, is not what ended up actually happening. My question is now, when a person gets a needle and they don't bring one back, what should the rest of us take away from what happened to the last needle that you gave them? So that ends up in a park somewhere that someone could step on? Isn't that the whole, when we wanted to do needle exchange, it was about, one of the benefits was we're helping people, plus we're getting these dangerous needles off the street. Like, isn't that wasn't that one of the goals of the program? So like, if people are just coming in using needles and never bringing them back, like, well, where are the needles going?
Thank you, Councillor Jourdain, for that question. What I mentioned at the beginning is our program does focus on bringing in more needles than we give out, and we do a variety of things to do that. One thing I didn't mention either is that when COVID hit, we went a lot more mobile. So we started using our mobile vans where we will drive. It's another attempt to meet the person where they're at. So we'll drive to the person and try to meet them in that way. And we make things as we focus a lot on disposal, and we do a lot of different initiatives to get the needles properly disposed. I wish it was a black and white issue and something about like just something that was easy to answer. But this is a very complex public health issue, and looking in, and I guess I guess it's just going back to all of the initiatives that we do to make it a point to really focus on disposal through all of the different things being done, and through the education with the people coming in, and through just working with people as they come in to bring them back. Pedro, do you have anything?
Yeah. So we do or try to do a great effort of picking up discarded syringes on our regular street outreach, where we focus on like getting out in the community and engaging with folks throughout Holyoke. With our focus on our street outreach is not only to engage the population that we serve that come in through our doors, but the general public, businesses, local businesses, residents out in the community that are willing to have a conversation with us. Our focus is definitely try to connect with the individuals that need our services, but also open up that dialogue. So again, when there's an opportunity for further conversations, I'm more than happy to join those conversations as well, whether it's with Rep. Duffy, some of the councilor members as well. I'm definitely open for that conversation. We do some efforts as far as, Liz kind of mentioned the hotline that we have. So it is specific to Holyoke, where individuals can call this number, leave a detailed message of a discarded syringe somewhere in the community, and we'll try to get out there within 24 to 48 hours if our offices are closed. If our offices, they happen to make these calls during our business hours, we're out there within 5-10 minutes. We also do a community needle pickup the second Saturday of every month, with weather permitting and weather gets nicer. I'm willing to, I'm extending the invite if anybody would like to join us and learn a little more about the program. To Counselor Vacone's point about getting her some of the information on the studies, we can definitely get you that. Counselor Murphy mentioned coming down to the Syringe Access program and having conversations with some of the staff and learning about some of the work that we do. I extend the invite to any council members that wants to learn more about the program to come down to our site. We've had past counselors come in, present counselors come in, and just having a conversation and learning more about the program. There's a lot of misconceptions with all that we do is sling syringes, and that's just the tip of the iceberg of that we do. That's definitely getting individuals walking in through the door and seeking out the services, but it's making that human connection with folks and that relationship building in the community.
And again, I'm not going to get into the whole, is it good, is it bad? I mean, those discussions are in the past. We're moving forward. Anybody that has concerns, I would just ask for good public reporting. I think it's good that the Tapestry does good statistics and keeps the community educated and works through the Board of Health, which is where the legislature wanted to change the power of all of this from the city councils of Massachusetts to the Board of Health. So, that's certainly within their purview to do, and that's what they did. So, if people have concerns, that's where it would be to move that focus. I did want to just talk, though, give a couple more points. One is to Rep. Duffy and Senator Vilas. Here again, a large percentage of the people that use this particular needle program come from out of town. Here's a situation where Holyoke steps up to the plate. Again, I come back to my initial remarks about why Holyoke needs the type of support. There's not a program, to my knowledge, like this in Chicopee or Springfield. And as a result, we're doing our part and we're stepping up to the plate and having these type of programs. And when there are things like, improvements that need to be made for parks and all of the other things that's associated, or extra dollars for cleanups and DPW services, all of this type of stuff. It seems that, again, it's no good deed goes unpunished. I think this is all part of that same mosaic of needing, making the case for us for added services. Just pivoting the conversation, because the old debate about needle exchange is kind of old at this point. That horse left the barn a long time ago. Wanted to ask you, what's the state of the state about clean injection sites? Legislature, that gets kicked around now as that was always step 2 that many have said in this whole process. Do you see that getting passed? And do you see one of those coming to Holyoke? I'd be interested on people's opinion about that. Thank you.
I do think that legislation is being taken seriously. It's been introduced every session. So the local input will be very important. It does follow this harm reduction model. So I want to learn more about it. I do. But I'm here to listen to your concerns, and when there's talk about should this pass, that's a big if. Should this pass, a really important part of the legislation will be talking about citing, and I hear you. I mean, we do our fair share. I am a big believer that we do our fair share. So there will be important considerations taken in. Should safe injection sites come to Massachusetts, your voice on where they're sited will be heard. But that's a big if. It's a big if.
Thank you.
Do you see, if I could, Madam Chair, do
Sure.
you see the local approval on that? If you could just answer that, do you think that would be Board of Health again, or do you think that one would come to the City Council? I'd just be curious as to your thoughts on that, please.
Wow, that's really far down the road. Important
Okay.
point. Important point. Having the
All right.
voting body, having the voting body have a say. I hear that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure, Pedro.
I just want to say something real quick.
Well, oh, sorry. I didn't mean to cut him off.
Oh.
All right, just real quick, I just want to make a clarifying point for Councilor Jourdain. We do have syringe access and disposal programs in Chicopee, Springfield, Holyoke, Northampton, Greenfield, Westfield, and we're approved to go into South Hadley, Amherst, Montague, Belchertown, and we continue to get requests to increase some of our efforts in surrounding communities as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just gonna,
yeah, go ahead, Senator. Yep.
No, I was just going to say thank you. I was going to say that too. They are far more wide than they're very widespread. To your point, in all of the communities you just referenced, and then Councilor Jourdain, I would just say that there is obviously you're following this debate. Rhode Island was the first state, so the two government-sanctioned facilities for overdose prevention sites right now in America are both in New York City. As I indicated previously, around a month or so ago, I went to the one in East Harlem to see how it's working out, right? I think my job as an informed lawmaker, particularly as chair of the Mental Health Substance Use Recovery Committee, is to go up there and to talk to what's going on, what are you doing, and to spend a lot of time talking about a lot of the neighborhood concerns, if you will. I will say to the rep's point, way too premature in terms of local authority, what that means. Is it a council thing? Is it a board of health? What I will tell you is the one state that has passed this now is Rhode Island, and what Rhode Island has said is not even city council versus board of health, it's local councils. Do you want to be part of this pilot program that's out there? The bills in Massachusetts that are out there involve pilot programs, and the conversations that I've been apprised of would require an opt-in from the communities. But again, it is way too early to speculate into that type of granular detail at this point in time. But that is going to be something that's vigorously debated, and obviously our colleagues in municipal government are a big part of that.
Madam Chair?
Sure.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate that. Very thoughtful answers. One of the things that I always wondered about for the needle program, when they talk about, they're picking up and they're doing a lot of good work, like, wouldn't it be wise, and I never understood, there was some resistance to this, that if they gave out one type of color-coded needle cap, like say a certain color, or there was something that what they gave out that designated it from them, then they would never be like falsely accused of contributing to the needle problem. Like if you find needles in the park, then no one could ever say, well, that's from the needle exchange program, because they don't give out that kind of needle. Like, wouldn't it make sense, or wouldn't it help the program to help make the case that you're not contributing to the amount of needles on the street if you used, like, your program used one kind, which was very clearly marked, versus another, and then this way, no one could ever say this came from your program? I think it would support the program, if anything, and people could say, they're not contributing anything to this. And I'd just be curious what people's thoughts are about having something that when they're officially, a designated program, that they use a certain type of packaging that would prove that these, needles that people are finding in parks and stuff are not coming from the needle program. Just curious people's thoughts on that.
Do you want to?
Yeah, I can just start with answering that. I believe when this question has come up before, the clearest response and answer that came to mind was that a syringe is a medical device that should not be tampered with. So any type of altering it or color coding it is just not recommended, given that.
Could I ask a follow-up question, Madam Chair?
Sure.
Liz, agreed. I don't think you would want to do aftermarket modifications. Totally in agreement with you there. I think you're 100% right. Wanted to ask you though, is couldn't you buy from one manufacturer with one color cap, for example, or, that it's not you doing the alteration, but it's coming from the manufacturer, like your caps are all lime green or they're all pink or something. So if somebody finds an orange one in a park, they can't say, oh, that came from Tapestry. That has nothing to do with Tapestry. And I just think it would show to the community that, Tapestry's, you're not contributing to the problem. What do you think about that?
Well, how we operate with purchasing syringes is they're commonly purchased through a distributor, and we often are searching for ones that are cost or that have the lowest cost. So I'd have to maybe think that through a little bit more, but just given the budget and just given the need to also get high quality syringes, I don't know if that would be an option.
Okay. Well, thank you for considering it, and maybe we need to get you some more money then to get you what you need. So thanks everybody for this discussion. It's very helpful.
Great discussion. Councilor Maldonado Velez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to start off with thanking Liz and Pedro for being here tonight. I had a little stint last summer working part-time at Tapestry, and I got firsthand to see everything that y'all do, from sexual reproductive health to the harm reduction, syringe access. All of it is a very amazing service that we provide to the people in our city and in the general area. It's funny that Councilor Jourdain mentioned a different color coding, because that was sort of like one of my thoughts as I was coming up with what I wanted to say. We have Tapestry here, but Tapestry is not the only place that people can access and get syringes. There's so many different places, and how are we targeting this one specific, or asking this one specific organization to sort of take responsibility for all the syringes that are found in that community? That's not fair to the organization. So, regardless of whether we do the color coding and all those sort of, other ideas that were brought up, the issue still is that there are syringes being found in our community. As one that lives downtown, I remember when I moved back home to Holyoke about 5-6 years ago, I used to have an album in my phone of actually syringes that I would see throughout the community as I walked. So this is a real problem. But I think what I would love to see is more education on the actual disposal of the syringes, and not just if you can't make the cleanup, if you don't have access to the phone, to call the hotline number. If someone, I've had a constituent say, I find syringes in front of my apartment, what do I do? They may not, and yes, Tapestry does pick it up, but sometimes they don't want to wait the 24 to 48 hours. So what sort of suggestions, education can we give to people how to properly dispose? I know there's this idea that if you even touch a syringe, all of a sudden, on the plastic, all of a sudden you're going to get all these diseases and all these sort of things. So I would love to see a more proactive, approach to hey, you see a syringe, this is what you can do, and a list of all the options, maybe videos or whatever it is, something that's accessible as much as possible to the community, because it is a problem. We do have syringes. I don't think anyone here in the room denies that there are syringes on the ground. That's not what we're arguing, but I think, how do we make sure that people, take a more proactive approach and are not scared of the syringes, but know that, they can do X, Y, and Z to make sure it got disposed. I know for me personally, I think it was 2 years ago, as part of a cleanup, I ended up leaving with a sharp, I don't even know what it's called, the red bin. And there are times that I see a syringe and I go into my car and I throw it away. So what kind of programs around that we can offer our community? And as far as the needle exchange, I think we this conversation is a lot around those that are using drugs, for very heavy street drugs. Well, my understanding is that those are not the only ones that have access. If someone is for guessing diabetes or steroids or anything else, they can also access these clean syringes at this place. So like this services is beyond just the ones that we stigmatize. It's a great service to the community. Drugs prices are getting higher. Healthcare is not the most accessible in our country, so this service does that for that. So I just wanted to say those kind of things and hope, and just put a push to like have more educational components to the community. Like, hey, this is how you dispose of it. You can't make the cleanup. You can't make the call. Like, what other alternatives are there to clean up our community without it? So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you, and thanks for being here, and thanks for Senator Vilas and Rep. Duffy for being here too in this conversation.
Thank you, Counselor. I see Counselor Puello's hand and then Counselor Bartley's hand.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And this will be the last time I speak. So I do have a couple points, and I do have two final questions, before I'm done. So I do want to touch on maybe, I think the color-coded caps is a really good idea. I think that would be really cool to see. I agree with Councilor Maldonado Velez. I think there's a big problem. I mean, I think maybe we can do something on the educational piece. My thoughts on that too, though, are I think maybe it's unfair to turn around and say we need to educate the taxpayer on, if you're walking down the street or if you're walking and taking your kids to the park, we got to educate you on how to clean up the needle. We got needles everywhere. At least, I'm glad we can admit that. I mean, we just heard we've got vans driving around looking for them. So I guess my first question is to Tapestry is, can you guys talk a little bit about how you're funded? Where how your money comes in, what your budget looks like. And then my last and final follow-up question, again, is to our state rep and to our state senator. I think that the color-coded needle is a really good idea. I think that, the medical needs that Councilor Maldonado Velez touched on are, that's great that people access this when they have legitimate health needs and concerns. So again, is this maybe something that we can codify through a state law? Because it sounds like a lot of this was just done through the state legislature, and there's all these questions and all these other things that are happening that aren't being addressed. So I'm wondering if maybe the initial question in the order makes a little bit more sense, and maybe can we talk about what the legislature can do, or if it's still too early, or I'm not sure what that looks like. Thank you.
So first I'll give our friends at Tapestry a chance to respond.
Yeah, sure. So in terms of funding, I don't have the exact numbers for the Holyoke site on me, but we are completely funded through the Department of Public Health. And I also do want to mention that through the Department of Public Health, they do have guidance, and we do check in with them regularly. We have a contract manager, and there's a lot of checks and balances that happen through that way. And although I don't have the exact figures with me for Holyoke, the funding for this particular site covers 1 full-time manager and 4 full-time staff, as well as our location at 306 Race Street and the cost of our mobile van, as well as program supplies and the costs associated with testing, counseling for HIV, hepatitis C, as well as free and anonymous naloxone distribution education, and also some support for people, Pedro and myself, with our ties to operating that. Yeah.
Madam Chair, can we get a follow-up with the finances, please, via an email? I remember filing an order to Tapestry before this order requesting all the details and all the information. I don't think we ever got that. So would we be able to get that in a follow-up, please, with all the financials and all the other statistics and everything?
Sure.
Maybe if we could do statewide too, that'd be awesome.
We can communicate that with our administrative assistant. I don't think there was an order in DGR about finances.
Yeah, I think it was just adopted and sent their way.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. And then
So I would respond by, I'm going to take Pedro up on his offer, because the process of legislation, as you all know, you're lawmakers, it involves conversations and questions and research, and I think the overriding question should always be, what problem are you trying to solve? And then what is the means for solving that? And I think that, these folks here are the experts, and I want to talk more with them. I want to talk with any constituents. This is not just anyone who's watching on Holyoke Media or reads about this. Anybody who has concerns about needles that they're finding, please, I would love to talk to you, and we'll bring in these experts and we can talk about different solutions.
Great, thank you.
And then I would just, sorry, Counselor.
That's
I would
okay.
just say, yeah, I agree. I mean, if there's anything in terms of the picking up the needles, how additional resources, obviously, certainly want to have that conversation because that's a big part of this discussion, whether it's this or whether it's the overdose consumption sites, the impact that it has on neighborhoods is a foremost priority that I think all sides agree to. And I guess I would just go back to, again, and I think, and I'm glad Attorney Bissonnette was on here today. I'm kind of going back to, so I know I've heard multiple times tonight correctly that the state legislature, and I believe what folks are referencing is 2016 as part of the budget, when the determination was made that the authority on whether or not to have these syringe programs rested with the city council or the local boards of health. And the decision, the legislation, was that it rests with the local boards of health. But my understanding, and admittedly, this is something, and this is why I think we need to kind of regroup and talk about all aspects of this, right? The legal, I think we need to really unpack this more, was that, and that's kind of why I go back to my initial question for the counselor, is that what in state law is prohibiting the order tonight or virtually anything else, when my understanding, and again, if I'm wrong on this, I will stand corrected, is that legislation essentially said the authority that has the ability to determine if this site can exist in a municipality is the Board of Health as opposed to the City Council. But when you get into the minutia of what that program looks like, my understanding, and again, I think that's why it would be helpful for Attorney Bissonnette to kind of do that deep dive, if you will, is, what provision of that state law prohibits what the counselor is asking for in his order or anything else. And that's where I'm still, not to be redundant, but I'm still a little bit confused. So I'll finish with that, but certainly on this topic or any topic, willing to continue to have the expansive dialogue that we've had tonight.
Thank you, Senator Bayless, and hopefully we can have our attorney possibly look into that. I do see Councilor Bartley's hand up.
Am I okay? Thank
Yes.
you. I must have been back. I don't know what I was doing. I do apologize because I know how annoying that is when you're sitting in the room. So I'm just sitting here in my easy chair. I'll be very brief, I promise. Just to John's last point, relative to the specifics, John, the problem is that when needle exchange came to Holyoke, there was no debate on needle exchange or its parameters. There was no specific vote in the Great and General Court about needle exchange and particulars. It was debated twice in votes for the municipality and went down in flames both times. It was debated in Superior Court by the city and the other side. It went down in flames. What happened was it was attached to an outside budget section, and thus it became law. So how can we answer your question reasonably and respectfully? Because you guys never debated it. And I know this predated you. When I say you guys, it was the general court. So Humison was in there, Vega was in there, and it went through. Now, I don't know the labyrinthian stuff that goes on in Boston as well as you two do. I can assure you of that. Although I have some clue, but not nearly what you guys do. But it was an outside budget section, John. So there's no way in heck we can say to you what state law I'm doing to. How do we know? Yeah, go. We don't even know what it was about. So let me end it on. Let me just stop there because I didn't know this whole thing's about Needle Exchange. Just two other things. One, to my friend Pat Duffy. Pat, I appreciate your leadership on housing. I do want to point out to you, listen, Holyoke and Joe and Pete and myself, we've been really on point as best as we can to support, the housing authority and to support the efforts at Lyman Terrace and support the efforts in South Holyoke. But what we're hearing is quite often it's the quality of the housing. Yes, it's true, the affordability, but I really hope that neither one of you are going to support rent control from a legislative. That was attempted on a statewide referendum, and that got defeated. And let's see what the general court does relative to what Boston City Council just passed. I mean, I hope. I mean, my understanding is that it's not going to get a lot of traction on Beacon Hill, and if it doesn't get traction there, then I'd rather have myself personally, and as a landlord as well, I'd rather have the open market determine. Now, I'm certainly very supportive of what you can do to bolster boards of health and building commissioners, beef up those line items to maybe get staff in there so that when tenants have complaints, that they can go to the Board of Health and they can talk to somebody and say, hey, listen, we're going to get on this and we're going to inspect it and then we're going to come clamp down with something about landlords. Oh, that's something I think that all of us can get behind 100%. But that, of course, takes financial resources to support boards of health and building departments at municipal level to really impact enforcement, to really knock slumlords off the block. I think if you could focus on that respectfully, I think we'd have some help. And the last thing is, and thank you, Madam Chair, for running a good meeting. The last thing is to my friend John and friend Pat. We've heard a couple times, hey, Holyoke, what are you guys doing for yourself? I think we heard a prior speaker say the Commonwealth is gonna they bought a house on Fairmont and now they're gonna tear it down and create a parking lot or whatever they're gonna do. Well, okay. Well, here's one thing that we could maybe get behind. I hope we could, but we need Boston delegation to help us. Is there a way that we can increase the ability to impose pilots on? And I've done a lot of work on this, and Joe's really helped me out a lot. I've had 4 separate finance committee meetings on pilots, and we finally moved it forward at the last city council meeting. But the issue really it's not even close to being resolved. And one of the things I think we could use some help on is when we have group homes. We have pretty significant number of group homes in the city. I'll happily figure out a ways, double digits anyhow. But I'll happily get a number, and then we'll attach thereto a value lost to the city of Holyoke relative to the lost property tax revenue. And our hands are tied. What can the city do to recoup that from group homes? We don't have a legislative mechanism to accomplish that. But you two could consider it in Boston and maybe come back to us. And then we could hopefully arm you two with data as how these group homes and the group homes, John and Pat, they're staffed by good people, but the administration they're so top heavy with salaries and they're multi-million-dollar operations. I mean, this is not a one and done deal. They own multiple group homes, so they take houses like in Central Park Drive. I'm not saying it's an exclusive neighborhood, but it's one of Holyoke's nicer neighborhoods. Gone. House is gone. Now it's a group home. Gone from the tax. I mean, in little old Elmwood, there was a house, and I don't want to point it out exactly because I don't want to call anybody out, but it was a residential, then it became a commercial. Poof, bought by a group home, and no longer a tax-paying entity, and yet calls for service to HPD continue to this day. And calls for service cost money, but the group home, well, don't look to us to chip in. We don't have to pay a pilot. So I'm hopeful, John and Pat, you're hearing that in Chicopee and in Westfield and in Westside and as Springfield. I know you don't represent Springfield, but you represent the other ones. And so East Hampton, I'm sure. Those are just a couple things in addition to what I said earlier that I just humbly ask you to consider. And thanks again for really spending. I didn't know the meeting was going to go this long, but thanks again for spending some quality time with us, because I for one really appreciate it. Thank you.
My refrain to everything is Gateway City Caucus, Gateway City Caucus, Gateway City Caucus. There does need to be pilot reform. I 100% agree with that. And also, I have, it's the second time I filed it with my colleague from Worcester, Dave LaBeouf, legislation to beef up code enforcement and to actually create a fund so that, to pay for those resources and that staff. So heard, 100% heard.
Thank you. Lastly, I want to thank everyone. This has been a really productive, respectful meeting, and I appreciate it. We do have two folks in the council chambers, and since we've suspended the rules to allow the public to speak, I just wanted to invite these two individuals up briefly to give their remarks, and just feel free to state your name and your address for the record, and we'll go from there.
Hi,
Nicole. Is that on?
Is it on?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Great. Yeah.
Okay. My name is Nicole Arnold, 124 Ridgewood Ave. I am going to read off my phone, so apologizes that I'm looking down just so I can focus and not ramble. For transparency reasons, I am a Board of Health Commissioner, but tonight I am not representing that. I am speaking here as an RN with many years of experience working directly with addiction, harm reduction, and the incredible humans that have benefited greatly by our local needle exchange programs that we've heard about tonight. I'm also a born and raised Holyoke community member who is very disappointed in the order to change or question the wording legislation regarding the life-saving needle exchange program that has already been put in place. I also came here tonight to speak on behalf of the humans who suffer substance use disorder who live in our community. They are constantly attacked, degraded, belittled, and rarely given a voice. I believe this order and request of rule change was brought up to legislators due to fear, ignorance, hate, and a very large lack of education, as we've heard and seen tonight, on the disease causing such conversations that we're having here. These humans I speak of will be affected greatly by a proposed change in this legislation, and I'm here to ask those who are being asked to change legislation to please use evidence-based practice, that of professional experts and those with lived experiences when making these decisions that will affect the greater good of our community. I'm asking you to please keep the negative and non-factual opinions of many out of the conversation when making these decisions that you are being asked to. When it comes to community help, opinions are very harmful. Statistics and facts are important and necessary. I also want to remind those here, and more specifically those on Zoom, who hold a license or position in which they took an oath to do no harm, to honor that oath when speaking and making decisions and comments about the humans who live in our community. The community you chose to represent and serve. An oath that was taken for all, not just those who fall into an agenda for political reasons or fear-mongering. Harm reduction saves lives. It saves money preventing long-term illness. It decreases the number of needles present in our communities. So yes, statistically, an increase with a rule change will happen if what's being asked for. Needle exchange programs statistically have been proven to reduce drug use. They don't just throw out needles to people and encourage drug use. That's false, and it's a narrative. And that is also, more importantly, which I heard tonight, I wanted the statistic from the CDC to be brought up that needle exchange programs and those who participate in them are 3 times more likely to enter treatment programs than those who are not helped by needle exchange programs. The only change that needs to be made is more funding for these programs, a heck of a lot more education for the public, those who serve our public, and more support for those using needles and those exposed to the secondhand needles that are being found, like in our parks, etc. I just ask that we not use those people as a disguise for the fear mongering that happens often. Also, a quick side that I had, we talked about the color coding of needles. I could be very wrong on this, but from my experience, needles are colored by gauges. It's not kind of a willy-nilly, just you can pick a color when you're ordering them. Those are actually, I'm pretty sure, are federal guidelines. Each gauge and size of a needle, things that are being used for different purposes are color coded, and that I don't think can be changed. And just lastly, needle exchange programs and rules and regulations that are put in place by trained, well-educated, and informed professionals do save lives, period. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Appreciate it. And last but not least.
Yes, I'll be the last one, so I'll be brief. Linda Pratt, 39 St. Colby Drive here in Holyoke, and I'm speaking as a member of the public and a volunteer with Tapestry. I moved to Holyoke almost 7 years ago. I had never seen a syringe on the ground where I lived in a small town in Ohio, but I started seeing them in Holyoke, and I first of all looked online to see where do I do with, where can I report this? And eventually I found out about Tapestry. So I started calling their hotline, and I walk a lot, so pretty soon they noticed, oh, it's my out-of-state area code, and they thought, she's going to call again. So we won't go out right this minute, because if she's out walking, she'll probably call again, which I did. So I started volunteering with them on their monthly syringe pickups. And it was mind-blowing to me how compassionate and how caring Pedro and Liz and the other Tapestry staff were. I did not have any experience with people who use drugs before I moved here. So I had never walked down the alleys of Holyoke like I did when we went out on syringe pickup. I had never watched them interact with participants. It was really life-changing for me. And so eventually they said, well, do you just want a sharps container and a pickup? And I said, sure. When you go on a syringe pickup with Tapestry, they teach you how to pick up syringes safely. There's no reason other people in the community cannot be doing this. You'll probably see me if you see me downtown and I have a white bag slung over my shoulder. I have a sharps container and I have little hand pickups, and I pick them up. It's not hard to do, and I would say to Councilor PUELLO, for folks in Ward 2, invite them, all of you, I would invite all of you to come and take part in one of the pickups with Tapestry, the community syringe pickups. It is really a wonderful experience. And I think you'll see that we can all participate in picking up syringes, which, as many people have said, can be purchased in drugstores, not just handed out at Tapestry. So I would really like to make a plea for that, for community involvement, and for people to realize that we can all be part of this solution for syringes on the ground in our community. So, and one other comment about the safe injection sites or the supervised injection sites. The first time I heard of that, I think I don't even know if we were on a community syringe pickup. I was like, what in heaven's name are they talking about? That's the craziest thing I've ever heard of. But after having walked down a street and having to throw Narcan to someone who was overdosing or who was helping someone who was overdosing, I I've really come to think differently about it. I think if you live in Holyoke and you see people injecting, and I've watched Pedro do resuscitation on someone where they used to be located on Main Street, it makes you think that we really have to think seriously about how we can keep people safe, we can keep people alive until they're ready to get treatment. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And I just want to thank everyone for their comments and discussion this evening. I want to thank Liz and Pedro very much for being here and taking time out of your day and for all the work that you do in our community. And of course, our state delegation, Pat and John, we really, really appreciate you guys coming in and hearing us out and continuing to advocate for Holyoke. So with that, I will entertain a motion.
I'll just say ditto and a motion to the orders have been complied with and that we adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Great. All those in favor? Do I have to do a roll call? Aye. Oh, I have to do a roll call. Hold on.
Yes.
Counselor Bacon.
Yes.
Counselor Bartley is not on the call. Counselor Rivera.
Yes.
Counselor McGivern.
Yes.
Counselor Murphy-Romboletti. Yes. And I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
Second? Second. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate your time.
Good night.
Night, everybody.